Chapter 18: The Power of Silence. You could say that all the years during which I lived in insecurity, I was also living with a very noisy mind. You might even say I had a black belt in overthinking. If there were contests for such things, I'm sure I could have been a world champion at overthinking, overanalyzing, and just in general thinking about my thinking. I can't remember the number of times friends would say to me, Ankush, you think too much. But what could I do? It seemed like this was simply a part of my personality, and there really wasn't anything I could do about it. I had tried meditating once or twice, but whenever I sat down, my mind just kept going, and I never got the hang of it. I even started to read a book on meditation, but wasn't focused enough to get past the first chapter. Not to mention that meditating felt like just one more thing to do at a time, when I didn't feel particularly adept at doing all the other things I thought I was supposed to be doing. When I started to see that I was creating my experience of life from the inside out, many of my misunderstandings and tendencies to overthink and overanalyze, which I felt was disrespectful, I would then play out the scenario in my head over the coming days. I would fantasize about what a good comeback might have been in the moment, or what I would say to them next time. I remember a specific time when a cousin of mine made a passing comment about my hairstyle as she was leaving our house. I ruminated about this for days. I complained to my parents about how rude she was and felt even more upset when they downplayed her comment. This was all steeped in misunderstandings about being disrespected and what my upset feelings were telling me. Spoiler alert: my feelings weren't telling me that my cousin was being disrespectful. Only the way I could tell I was being disrespectful was by feeling disrespected. Now, if that feeling was generated inside me via my own thinking, then no one could make me feel disrespected. I was the only one who could do so by thinking disrespected thoughts. Once I realized this, I could drop all that thinking about how to get back at my cousin, because she hadn't disrespected me in the first place. I could simply drop the entire incident and move on. The same reasoning holds true for any other time in which I feel disrespected. When I learned to do this, my mind was a lot quieter and I found myself living a much happier life. It's pretty obvious when I think back to it. If my mind is busy thinking about things like how someone hurt or upset me and how I can protect myself or get back at them, I'm too busy in my head to enjoy the present moment. It was freeing not to have a noisy mind where I was always thinking about one thing or another. I hadn't even realized how noisy my mind was until it started to quiet down. I now found myself returning to this space of silence more and more. I still don't meditate, but I look to spend time in this meditative space. It's the space that I enjoy rather than the practice of meditation. Spending time in this silent space seems to result in the insights that I mentioned earlier, and in increased creativity and the ability to come up with solutions to any challenges I am facing. Once you experience this space of quiet, I guarantee you'll want to spend more time there. Note that I am not passing judgment on meditation or telling you whether or not to meditate. If a client asks me whether they should meditate, I tell them if it helps, keep doing it. I can also tell immediately when I meet someone who doesn't spend much time in a quiet mind. Can't we all? There is usually a noticeable lack of presence and a sense that they're not quite listening. I was recently working with a client who was burdened by his own thinking and had been for years. He prided himself on being someone with a high intellect, but he was also full of insecure and fearful thoughts. These led him to make some ineffective decisions and kept him from being truly happy. After pointing him to how he was creating this reality, his beliefs around various issues started crumbling and he began to cry. Ironically, one of the things that shifted in him came about when he realized for years he had been attending events and trainings reading books and watching videos to finally feel okay inside. He had mistakenly thought that more information would finally give him the answer. Yet, trying to digest more and more information made his mind speed up more than ever. I could relate to him. I had walked a similar path myself. It always looked like I needed more information, and silence didn't seem to provide a solution. It's important to realize that silence isn't the solution in and of itself. Discovering the silence within us is a side effect of dropping our ideas, beliefs, and misunderstandings. You could say that we are living in silence, but our misunderstandings keep us from finding that space inside ourselves. A few days later, my client told me about how his mind had never been this quiet and how he knew deep down that his life would never be the same again. I knew he had really heard something. I also knew that the more he explored what I had pointed him to, the more his old thought patterns would begin to fall away, and the insights and new ideas would pop up, just as they had done for me. Perhaps you'd like to close this book now and take a few moments to see if you can notice the silence beneath all of your thinking, ideas, beliefs, and stories. Finding silence. Like Kush, years ago, I tried meditation and didn't work for me. And then I noticed one day how doing other things, so I'm a musician, and I used to be a trumpeter, nowadays I'm a singer. And I noticed that when I was singing, there was very little else on my mind. It was kind of like a meditative state. I wasn't singing to meditate, but the meditative state seemed to appear when I was singing. It's been really interesting reading these chapters with all of you because I find the same. I find that when I'm reading, there's just this beautiful silence and then the sound of reading. And sometimes when I'm reading, the insights are so powerful that I'll stumble on a word and then kind of have to find my place again. I think I did it in that chapter. I can't quite remember. But I remember just reading something and thinking, oh, the insight came. Oh, right. Oh, that's what that is. And then there's just reading carrying on. So yeah, meditation for me isn't a practice, but more and more I see that the meditative state of a quiet mind is available regardless. It's not conditional on any particular circumstance. Even in a really noisy place, I can still have a very, very quiet mind. So let me know, what's your experience? Have you tested meditation? Do you find that there are certain spaces where that quiet mind is more prevalent? And do you find that there are places where the mind gets noisy? They might be interesting things to look at. See you on the next chapter.